Um, there we go. And thank you for taking time out. It's always busy, but it feels extraordinarily busy these days, at least to me. And thank you to whoever made it possible for you to take this time out and is attending to all of those kids and dogs and other things that need to be attended to in order for you to have this time. I am understanding that you all, or at least most of you, are early childhood educators or administrators or somehow involved in the school readiness programs in Enfield. And so I'm speaking to that audience, but I also always assume that a good portion of us are parents. And so some of what we'll be talking about will apply and support your parenting as well. And then finally, a little bit about what we're talking about tonight in particular will apply to us as individuals living in the world we're living in today. So do keep, all three of those perspectives in mind for our conversation tonight. I'll do my best to leave a little time at the end still, even though we're starting late, to have a little chat, and we'll answer questions, and I'll give you my contact information as well, should you want to follow up. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and you're going to help me out by telling me in 1 second, hang on, that you see one slide. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Somebody nod. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Just making sure. So our conversation tonight, I title Redefining Challenging Behaviors, Nurturing Post-Pandemic Patience. We're going to approach the topic of challenging behaviors from the perspective of the environment. What could be potentially instigating what we are now hearing is a sudden spike in behavior challenges. We're going to talk about what challenging behavior really is, even how we define that, and then what our role is in this dynamic of a potential behavior spike in our classrooms, and how we can mitigate that both for the sake of the children and for our own well-being. My name, as Amy said, is Peg Oliveira. I am the director of the Gazelle Program in Early Childhood at the Yale Child Study Center. I come to this work as a developmental psychologist with a background in working in preschools throughout graduate school, before graduate school, what am I saying? Started in high school, through graduate school, worked on childcare policy for much of my career, and then eventually landed here at Gazelle. What I do want you to know about Gazelle is we were named after a very amazing thinker named Dr. Arnold Gazelle. Dr. Gazelle was instrumental in shaping child development science as we now know it by actually turning it into a science. Before Dr. Gazelle, we sort of knew about kids because people like me who were psychologists would like watch our own kids and write about it, right? And now we know
Kinsley, get the stamp can.
right?
We'll get our stamp can. Lost you. What stamp can? We have it here.
Can everyone mute, please? Somebody
I'll
needs
make
to
sure
mute.
we're muted. That would be great. And so Dr. Gazelle started to study children right here at Yale. He was the founder of the Yale Child Study Center. And what he found was that kids go through these predictable stages, right, paths of child development, but they all do it at their own unique pace. And that the lesson that he left us was to allow children to be children, to go through these phases at their own pace, and that rushing them didn't really do any good. That getting to these milestones sooner was not necessarily better, and sometimes was even detrimental. And science has proven that to be the case over and over again in the 70 years since. Our mission here at Gazelle is to promote these principles of child development, inspired by innovation and objective wonder. We try to stay new and current. I'm bringing you, what we now know from the research on child development and brain development. But we also try to balance that with a sense of wonder, right? So if I ask you right now to take a second and think back to why you got into this work to begin with, right? My suspicion is that you didn't do it because you really looked forward every day to getting up and trying to, get a whole bunch of 4-year-olds to meet some set of standards defined by a whole bunch of people who knew nothing about kids, and then start all over and do it again the next day, right? That was not the driving force for you. Probably something more like you found kids really fascinating, you found them kind of weird, you wanted to know more about it. That's where we try to get back to every day. And that's my job, is to re-inspire you all to remember why you got into this work to begin with, and recommit to it from that place of awe, of interest and curiosity. So let's try to remember that frame as we go through this work today. We do have a couple of tools here at Gazelle that I want you to know about. We have the Gazelle Developmental Observation. It's a 45-minute developmental assessment tool. And then we have the Gazelle Early Screener, which is a 15-minute assessment tool. If you are looking for a good way to do high quality, objective child observation and assessment, talk to me about those. All the work we do, and this begins to frame our conversation tonight, is from a neurorelational approach. What does that mean? It means we take what we now know from neuroscience, what we know about how kids' brains develop, and we balance it with what we also know from the science about relationships, about the importance of connection, right? And that's going to become a really important part of our conversation tonight. It's what we used to call the nature-nurture argument, right? But now it's not an argument, it's a conversation. Why? Because epigenetics has taught us that the nature-nurture debate is dead, that there's no such thing as is it nature or is it nurture, that they're inextricably connected, that nurture, in fact, can impact nature, that your environment can actually change your gene expression, right? And not only yours, but generations beyond you. And so that's like a little mind-blowing, right? What our kids are going through right now, even if the pandemic ended today, if we had a cure, it was over, the masks were burnt, we had a big party and done, our kids have been impacted, and their brains, their nervous systems have been impacted. There is no doubt about that. The question is, what impact will it have? What kinds of positive, what kinds of negative, and how long will that impact go on for? That's the conversation we're having now. So now I ask you, I bring it back to you all. In the title, I offer the phrase challenging behaviors. If you don't mind, use your chat box and tell me what are challenging behaviors? How do you think about challenging behaviors? What are some examples of challenging behaviors? Just give me an idea of what we're talking about in your mind when we say the phrase challenging behaviors. Find the little chat quote bubble up there, and then you can type in whatever your answers are. They're great. So everything from examples like task refusal, elopement, everyone's favorite, right? Physical and verbal aggression, loss of self-control, can't self-regulate, to explanations like it's behaviors that can't be stopped, behaviors that you don't know what to do with, behaviors that make situations stressful, right? That's fantastic. So we kind of have an idea of what we're talking about here, right? Responding to that, I'll offer these thoughts as well. Anything that causes injury to the self or someone else is probably a challenging behavior, right? Anything that causes damage to your room, to your furniture, to your materials in the room, to other kids' materials, that's challenging behavior. And in general, anything that interferes with learning, right? Things that are happening in your classroom that are quite frankly inconvenient to getting the job of learning done. Those can be challenging behaviors. Here's the funny thing about this activity, right? Is that we all came up with some that were like, oh yeah, that would be pretty challenging. But in truth, it's a bit subjective, right? What's challenging and what's not. For example, if I said, well, if I put in the chat box spitting is a challenging behavior, would I get any pushback, or are you all in agreement with me? Seems like, yeah, sure, spitting seems like a pretty challenging behavior. But what if I said, well, what about spitting into the sink when you're brushing your teeth? Oh, well, right, yes, no, that's okay, but not just generally, right? Okay, right. So the thing to remember is that what makes a behavior challenging is partly situational, right? Like dancing. Is dancing a challenging behavior? Well, no, we like that kids dance. Well, what about dancing during story hour? Okay, story time. Okay, well, that's a little challenging, right? It depends. It's not necessarily the behavior itself, and it's not necessarily just my reaction to the behavior, right? But that's part of it, how I perceive it. It's how I perceive it because of the environment, because of the expectations of the moment. And so it's not as black and white as, these behaviors. Aggression, maybe you can say, well, that's always sort of, a problem behavior. Well, not really. There are plenty of sports where we say, get aggressive, be aggressive, right? So even that, you can't quite say black and white, that's always a problem, right? And that's important to remember. It's a little bit subjective. How do these challenging behaviors make you feel? I'll tell you, for me, they make me feel a little bit like my head is on fire, right? Like when things are happening in the classroom, defined as you define them, right? Like I don't know how to control it. I don't know how to stop it. Kids are hurting one another. Kids are hurting me. My brain is on fire. Well, the thing to remember here, and my hope, is that this information will inspire us to move towards understanding and patience, right? Is that the child's brain in that moment probably feels a lot like this too, right? And so we're going to unpack like why our brains feel like this under stress, why a child's brain might be on fire under stress. And importantly, recognize that when two brains are on fire, no good decisions are being made at that point, right? And so in that dynamic, there's really only one of us, is it the grown-up or the 4-year-old who has the greater capacity for self-regulation to put the fire out in their own brains, right? And I'm hoping the answer is ding, 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 the adult, not the 4-year-old, right? We'll see. And we'll talk a little bit about how we deal with our own fiery brains, right? So there are some basic reasons why the kinds of challenging behaviors we described come up in a classroom. And stick with me, right? Like we're starting at the sky level and then we're going to dig in, right? Before you say, well, there's lots more reasons. I know there's lots more reasons, but hang with me here. There's common reasons, right? First, there's a mismatch between the ability of the child and the expectations we have for that child. When a child cannot meet expectations or feels stressed by the expectations, or that when the expectations are just completely inappropriate, right? That's when challenging behaviors arise. Let's be fair and honest with ourselves about that. That sometimes happens, right? I sometimes get, I get emails and phone calls all day here from parents and teachers like, I have this problem, this is happening, what am I supposed to do about it? And so I'll hear, I have a preschool classroom. I cannot get the kids to sit still during story time. They're running around the room, they're dancing, they're blah, blah, blah. I cannot get them. Well, how old are the kids? Well, they're 3. Okay, well, and how long is your story time? It's 45 minutes. Okay, here's your problem. Your kids are 3 and your story time is 45 minutes, right? There's actually not a problem here, except that your story time is 45 minutes and your kids are 3. Now, which thing can we fix? Well, I can't make your kids be not 3, right? We can try really hard to make these 3-year-olds act like 43-year-olds who can sit still for 45 minutes, but that seems really like a big hill to climb, right? Or we can take your 45-minute story time and turn it into 12 minutes, which is probably more appropriate for a 3-year-old, right? So when there's this mismatch between our expectations and the child's abilities, we get ourselves into trouble. The other common reason we see challenging behaviors arise in the classroom is that kids are communicating a need, right? They know they have a need, they feel they have a need, but they don't have the resources, the words, the language, the ability to really understand that need or communicate it well. So they're trying to communicate a need, but they do it in not so productive ways, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about one of the big needs that get communicated. But let's remember that potentially big reason why we're seeing some behaviors in our classrooms. We're also going to talk a little bit about what is happening in the meltdown, right? We're going to go through the neuroscience of the meltdown. What do we mean specifically between the mismatch between ability and expectations? Well, as Dr. Gazelle taught us, all children go through the same stages of development. There are specific behaviors associated with an age and a stage, and each child has his or her unique pace. Sooner is not better. There's the big trick word, unique pace, right? Now, do our curriculum typically allow for each child has his or her unique pace? Not always. Does it allow for sooner is not better? Not usually, right? So that's tricky. We as teachers have to get really creative and good at our jobs in order to differentiate and individualize our instruction in order to allow for, one curriculum that's kind of a box, right? To fit all the kids in our room. And that's really hard, don't get me wrong. But when we miss that, sometimes some kids are being asked to do things that they're just not ready for, right? And that mismatch can cause them to express their stress. We'll skip that guy. So here's an example. Let's take a 2.5-year-old, because everybody knows the terrible twos, right? The terrible twos are actually not terrible, right? The twos are actually not half bad. If you really think about it, it's 2.5 that's just like, oh my God, I can't take it anymore, right? When they hit 2.5, all heck breaks loose, right? So what's typical of a 2.5-year-old? They use language in trying to control other people. They understand more than they can express. They're often in conflict, they're inflexible, they're explosive, difficulty accepting anything new. They like what they like. They like role playing, they like to give orders, they're bossy, and they often choose things that can be taken apart and put back together, right? Your 2.5-year-old is the one that often takes things apart and doesn't know how to put it back together. 2.5-year-old is your little boss baby, right? Very demanding. So if that's what we know about 2.5, right, then best practice, what we need to do is build our classrooms around what we know about that developmental stage, right? The environment needs to include simple hands-on toys and activities, things they can take apart, and it doesn't matter if they can't put it back together again, but they can try. Very clear, simple routines, right? Predictability, repetitive. They will not get bored. How do I know? Because one of us should have been the ones who became millionaires from writing Baby Shark, do, right? If that song can make bazillions of dollars, we know 2.5-year-olds do not get bored easily. Proof right there. We need to meet their frustration, right, with empathy and modeling of calm, right? That they're sort of like trapped in these brains and bodies that they want to be bigger and do more, and they can't. We need to give them little jobs to keep them busy and feeling successful and in control because they want to be the little boss baby. And they're very literal, right? We can't say things like, break a leg, because they'll be like, that's horrifying. Why would you say that to me? They don't understand common catchphrases like that. You have to sort of be very clear with them. Hey, take it easy over there. And then they continue to do what they were doing. And you're like, why doesn't this kid ever listen to me? Well, take it easy over there means nothing. You're the teacher in the Peanuts cartoon. Like they don't hear anything. So the point there is we need to check our expectations, right? Does what we know about child development at that age match what we're expecting them to be doing in the classroom? Is the expectation something that children are generally capable of doing at this stage of development? Is the expectation something that is within that particular child's ability, right? And is the expectation necessary for safety or well-being? Because sometimes we have these expectations that we don't, if really pressed, we're like, I don't even know why I care if kids do that, right? I don't even know why I care if, they have both shoes on. This one kid just constantly wants to wear one shoe. Okay, whatever. Like if there's a safety reason, a fire drill thing, whatever, get the 2 shoes on. Otherwise, it's probably just your own hang up. Let it go, right? Here's the new thing I wanna offer. We also need to check our expectations about, is this something that the children in front of me today are capable of? Now, those of you who have been teachers for a really long time have a particular hard job with this question right now, because we are seeing a cohort of kids that look different than kids who came before them, right? Typically what you do in January is potentially not what you're doing this January. And that is not to say that kids are developmentally behind or ahead. They're just having a different experience, right? So we may be finding kids who are, and I don't know, we don't know, none of us know, like anecdotally we're hearing some things, but we don't have, a decade of research on this yet, because this pandemic has been in existence for, 2 years, which to us is like 5 minutes, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, it feels like it's been forever, but really it's a short amount of time in the history of child development, right? And so what we might see is kids who are really good with fine motor skills, or exceptionally good with fine motor skills, because they've been in their houses and doing a lot of small things and typing and using crayons and small things, and maybe they're having some gross motor problems because they're not moving and getting out and doing big things as much. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe everybody's outside now and gross motor skills are going to be like off the charts, but nobody's coloring and writing and doing. Maybe the language is going to be impacted because we're not socializing our kids quite as much. We have no idea. What we do know is that these kids are having a different life, right, than 4-year-olds did a decade ago. And so we have to stay in that space of objective wonder, to be interested, curious. Who are these kids that we're getting, and what are they? And this is really important. What are they really good at? Because everyone is telling us what they're probably going to be bad at. And I guarantee you, kids always find things to be good at too, right? When you change their environment, yes, sometimes if you take certain things away, certain skills will, need additional supports. but usually some other skills jump in and up, right? And so I ask you to please start watching for what is this generation of kids really good at, because there's something there. And we need to be the ones to like advocate for that conversation to sort of balance all of this, like, you know, kids are missing out, kids are losing out, kids are having these deficits, right? Checking our expectations. At every stage, we have to keep developmental process in mind and be sure that our expectations, our environment, our interactions and experiences match the development and learning abilities of the children in front of us at each stage. Really, this is just what we know and call developmentally appropriate practice. We've always been taught it. It just becomes extra important right now when we just aren't sure what experience kids are having, and we have to be even more alert to their needs and skills, right? All right, we're going to skip that one for tonight. Here's what, to me, challenging behaviors are like in a classroom, right? What's this thing? It's an iceberg, right? And so it's huge and it's rock hard and it's not going anywhere. It's been here forever. It's not going anywhere. And every day we come into the classroom and these huge challenging behaviors, right? Even if it's just one child, we know even one child can really change the mood and the dynamics in a classroom, right? They are very powerful. And so sometimes it feels like this big iceberg. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to change it. And then our, you know, our school system is so lovely, and our, you know, early care policy is so helpful to us. And they're like, here, teachers, here, preschool teachers, take this one match, but you only get one because budget cuts, right? And here's one match, and you go and melt that big old iceberg with your one match. But you teachers, like, you're amazing. And you get up and every day you come in and you're like, okay, I got my match. I'm going to deal with this iceberg in my classroom today. And you go at it with full passion. And I am so grateful, and I'm thanking you from the rest of the parents out in the world for doing that. But it's a hard job, right? And here's the scary thing. Beneath that iceberg is an even bigger iceberg. That's the part that we have to deal with. And it wouldn't be a presentation in 2020 if we didn't talk about Bruno. It is time to talk about Bruno, because Bruno is what's under that iceberg, right? Bruno is the story, it's the emotions, it's the stuff we don't want to think about, it's the hard things that we don't want to deal with, that in Encanto they stuff inside the wall. We don't talk about Bruno, right? Put it in the wall. We don't talk about feelings. We don't talk about our trauma. We don't talk about our story. Just put it in the wall. It's under the iceberg, away. The problem is if all you do all day is deal with the top of the iceberg, right? The power struggles, the kid that's like, oh my God, they need so much attention all day long. They're mean, they want revenge. There's this like sense of inadequacy, and it's a fight every single day. It's a power struggle. It's a fight. If we spend all our time up there, Bruno is still in the wall, right? Undealt with. And we know that he had to come out in order for this story to finish, right? The same is true here. Under the iceberg are the real reasons why we're having those behaviors in the classroom, right? That below the power struggles and the fight for attention is a need for connection, to feel like we count, that we're capable, and we have control. That children feel like they're connected, they matter, they can do stuff, and they have some control over their environment and lives, right? And if you really think about some of the kids who are, the bringers of those challenging behaviors, quite frequently, you can see and feel, and it makes sense that, yeah, actually what they need is to feel a little more empowered, to feel a little more connected. These are basic human needs, right? We all need these 4 C's to thrive in our lives. And so when I see a kid, you know, not doing it well because like they're 4, right? I don't even like do a really good job of making it clear in a productive and healthy way when I need connection, right? So how do I expect a 4-year-old to do that well? When I see a 4-year-old exhibiting behaviors and we're like, oh, they need so much attention, right? I think actually what they need is connection. What if we flip this and we say it's not attention, it's attachment. They need relationships. And then I start to get a little more patient with the behaviors, right? If I can understand what's underneath, right? Then maybe I have a shot at 1, empathizing with this child, and 2, supporting them and helping them and finding a way to begin to meet those needs so that the behaviors don't actually even have to arise. So rather than trying to melt my iceberg with my 1 match, I'm going underneath. I'm getting at the cause of the iceberg, and then I have some hope. The thing to remember is that beneath every behavior is a feeling, right? And beneath every feeling is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause rather than the symptom. That's important, to get at the root. Here's what I want you to walk away with understanding about the brain in this conversation, is that the brain has basically 3 levels, right? It's got the bottom, the middle, and the top. And the bottom back is the part that develops first. Even in a tiny little baby, this part of the brain is well developed. It's the oldest part of the brain. The whole brain is a survival organ. Its job is to keep you alive. But that back part in particular is really invested in survival. It's the fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain, right? It's when you touch a hot pan, you pull it away. You don't think about it. You don't think about, you know, reasons or strategies. You just do it. It's reactive. That's the back part of the brain. Keep you alive. Run, freeze, or fight. Middle is the emotional brain. It's the limbic system. It's also memory, right? So emotions and memory are very much connected. And then the top part of the brain is the executive function brain, or the front. It's the prefrontal cortex, right? It's responsible for what we call executive function capacities, right? What are those? They're really important, actually. They're the things that allow us to actually act human, right? Different than my little dog that's mostly back brain. It's the front brain that that is responsible for self-regulation skills. The brain develops over time, right? And in particular, the front brain develops over time. So these executive function capacities come in last. Remember I said the brain goes from back to front, bottom to top. So this is the last part. It doesn't really fully come online until like your late 20s. So 4-year-olds, you know, they're in a big state of executive function growth, but they're not done yet, right? And so we have to remember that and have a little patience with that they are in the process of growing these executive function skills of self-regulation, control, but also flexibility, you know, cognitive flexibility, patience, creativity, problem solving, all of that is executive function. And it slowly comes in over time. Here's, not to stress you out, but here's the thing. You guys have the most important job on the planet. I've said this before, right? Why? Because between 3 and 5, there is this huge window of opportunity for dramatic growth in those executive function skills. Let's go back. Right here, there's this boom in executive function skills. It's like at different points in child development, your brain and body are primed to work on something, right? So like when you turn about 12 months, between 10 and 14 months, your brain and body are really primed to get you upright and walking on 2 legs. That's the work of about 12 months, right? The work of 3 to 5 is executive function. It's why pretend play is so big. You know, you're imagining, you're problem solving, you're creating. It's quite potentially life-changing if we can, and brain-changing if we can support children's executive function growth in those 2 years, which makes the preschool years potentially the most important of your entire schooling, right? And I went to school for many, many years, and I didn't go to preschool. And my daughter reminds me that that's part of my problem all the time. That there are fundamental skills that are learned in preschool that it's not that you can't learn them later, but the brain is just ready, right? And so if you think about it that way, and then you say, well, so then what's the work? What's the goal of my preschool classroom? It is to grow the front brain. It's to support children in developing their prefrontal cortex and executive function skills. We know that that's important because the world as it exists and is evolving needs innovators, not imitators. Once upon a time, imitation was enough. You know, I'll show you how to do it, then you do it, and you do it a whole bunch of times over and over again, right? That's no longer the case. What the world now needs are people who problem solve, and not just problem solve, but define the new problems, who even see the problem ahead, right? And then start thinking about solutions to it. That's why we need executive function skills to be at the center stage in our preschool classrooms, but also because it's good for kids, because it's what kids want and need to be doing when they're 3, 4, and 5 years old. No significant learning, however, can occur without a significant relationship. Why is that? Bottom, middle, and top brain. Because first, we have to soothe the back brain, the brain that, if that fight, flight, or freeze brain, if it is excited, if it is nervous, the front brain says, oh, that's more important. You take care of business. We got to stay alive, right? And that's evolutionarily important, right? When you're about to crash your car into a tree, you want the back brain to say, slam on the brakes. Let's not think about, creative solutions to this problem. We don't want the prefrontal cortex to then suddenly come in and be like, hold on, back brain, let's think about, let's collaborate on this, right? That's not the time for the prefrontal cortex to be involved. So there are times in emergencies when we want the back brain to just react, move fast, make a decision, and go. The problem is that if most of your life is emergencies, then the back part of your brain gets a whole lot of exercise. It gets really strong and it starts constantly firing, right? The brain becomes habituated to be in that state of fight, flight, or freeze. Everything feels like a threat. And the front brain literally atrophies. It gets smaller. It sort of weakens, right? It's like taking a nap. It's like, back brain's got this again. And then when we want the front brain to come on, when we're like, hey, 4-year-old whose life is this constant barrage of stress, come listen to my really awesome story by using your front brain to be self-regulated and thoughtful and creative. The front brain is like, what, huh? I'm napping. The back brain has been in charge for most of my life. That may be why we sometimes have these experiences where you think like, why did, tripping over a block suddenly like trip this kid up into this tantrum, right? Well, maybe it wasn't that one incident. Maybe it was a set of ongoing chronic stresses in this child's life that has set their back brain on fire, right? Remember that head with the fire, right? It's very hard to put that fire out and make calm, conscious decisions from the prefrontal cortex. How do relationships come into play? Because self-regulation and executive function skills are just that. They're skills. They need to be learned. And how kids learn them is through modeling, through watching us, right? How kids learn them is by us taking their hand and supporting them through the learning process in self-regulation skills. Attachment and learning are what exploration, right? Exploration is learning. Learning involves asking questions and doing something new and different and stepping out of your comfort zone, right? They're sort of at this tug of war, right? Kids want to feel safe and connected and loved. And so they're pulling towards attachment, right? If they have that, then they start to let off on it a little bit and they can be like, okay, I can move over towards exploration. But if they don't feel safe and connected, they're not willing to take that risk, those chances. Neither are we, right? We want to feel safe and loved and connected first, then we're willing to take some risks and chances. So in child behavior in the classroom, what we see are kids who are showing the need for connection in ways that we call, they need attention, right? And what they really need is to feel like a part of the community, is to feel empowered, is to feel like they have a purpose in the room. Once we give them that, then they let off a little bit. They don't need so much, and they're freer to do some exploration, some creativity, some risk taking. I'm going to skip this slide right here and go to here. What we find often are kids who are in one version or another of dysregulation, right? They're either low, under-aroused, hyper-regulated, right? They're withdrawn, they're not connecting, they're sort of in themselves, they're not socializing, or they're high, hyper-aroused, dysregulated. They're bouncing off the wall all over the room. And both of those states are probably contributing to our challenging behaviors, right? Neither of those is a convenient state to find a 4-year-old in. And what we want are these beautifully regulated, authentic, reflective, lovely children kind of in the middle, right? And it's kind of funny to say, like, when does that happen? At 4, right? But it's an okay goal to have. The thing is that we have to help them there, that it doesn't just happen. 2 brains on fire do not make for good, regulated, authentic, reflective classrooms, right? We need to be the model of this self-regulated, calming, the behavior we want to see in our classrooms so that children can follow along, as well as actually learn it. When you ask kindergarten teachers what are the most important skills that preschool teachers can send their kids with, it's not reading, it's not math, it's self-regulation, right? Kindergarten teachers say, we just want kids who can be in a classroom and contribute rather than cause friction, right? So we find these kids in dysregulation, be it hyper-aroused or under-aroused, and we want them to get to self-regulation. When we think about it with a baby, we kind of get it. We're like, okay, yeah, baby's crying, baby's freaking out. We don't yell from the other room, hey, baby, chill out, you're fine, right? Hey, baby, you're okay, don't worry about it. Maybe we do, but that's not very effective, right? What we know is that we have to pick up the baby, we have to rock the baby, we have to soothe the baby. When it's the baby, we get it. We're like, okay, that makes sense. I understand. Suddenly they turn 4 and are we yelling from the other room, hey, 4-year-old, pull it together? Well, not really, but sometimes kind of, right? We have some weird expectations like, oh, hey, 4-year-old, control your body. Don't you think if they could, they would? Like, it's not fun to be in a tantrum. It's exhausting, and kind of makes you want to puke, right? Or hey, 4-year-old, stop slapping and use your words. Well, yeah, what words exactly are those that you want me to use? So when I give those examples, you're like, oh, well, okay, maybe we do a little over expecting of our 4-year-olds. What we need to do is the same thing we do with our babies. Now, not necessarily pick them up and hug them and rock them, but maybe at 4 we still need to do a little of that, but we need to do the developmentally appropriate 4-year-old version of that we call co-regulation, right? It's about meeting them where they are, saying things like, I know you're frustrated. Because if you say, hey, use your words, that's like saying, hey, Bruno, stay in the wall. We don't have space for feelings here. We don't have time for your emotions, right? Keep it under the iceberg. What we need to say is, I know you're having big feelings. big feelings are okay. I have big feelings too. I see that your block tower got kicked over. If someone kicked over my block tower, I'd be really angry. Maybe you're feeling angry too. What do you need to do because you're feeling angry? Because sometimes hearing someone else say, like, I get that you're angry is pretty awesome, but maybe not quite enough. I might still need to do a little something, right? Do you need to, and then you give some options that are appropriate, right? Like, do you need to throw a ball against the wall? Do you need to punch a pillow? You got to figure out what you're okay with in your classroom to show anger. Because the message we want to send is emotions happen, we all have them. It's okay to have them. You don't have to hide them in the wall. But I can't let you throw the block across the room because you're angry. Some behaviors are just not going to be acceptable, right? Feelings are acceptable, but some behaviors are not. So can we give you some behaviors to use that acknowledge your feelings and allow you to express them in a useful way? That's co-regulation, right? We can't always stop the storm, right? The big feelings, the causes of stress, the chronic stress in a child's life. But what we can do is try to be the anchor, the thing that stays calm in the storm. That requires a lot of work for ourselves and then a lot of work in support of our children. I'll leave us with this last slide. And we could spend another 2 hours just on this slide, but 4 quick reminders of how to meet children where they are, co-regulate with them, and begin to have a little bit of patience and empathy with the behaviors in our classrooms to understand where they're coming from. 1, soothe. First, you have to put out the fire in the back brain. A brain on fire is not going to listen to use your words or control your body, right? So first, we just have to calm the whole thing down. Help kids be seen, right? Empathize, acknowledge. I hear you, I see you, I feel you, I know you're having big emotions, right? And then, but you're safe, right? But I still love you, but you're still welcome in our classroom. And sometimes that means physically keep everyone safe, right? Make some choices about what that needs to look like, right? And then secure, stable relationships. I'm still here. You're still welcome. This is a new day, clean slate, right? Those 4 steps support children through having big emotions in a way that, rather than having a kid who is having a tantrum or being aggressive to another child because they have a need for connection or security or attachment, rather than taking that child and disconnecting them further through punishment or some other or words that just don't acknowledge that they're having a legitimate experience, right? What we want to do is reconnect them, right? Reconnect them to us, reconnect them to the other kids in the room. Remember that when children are having big emotions, we are having big emotions too. When their brain is on fire, typically it ignites a fire in ours. It is rational and reasonable to also have big emotions, right? But that personal reaction is not necessarily always the best appropriate professional action. That we need to have ways in which we soothe our own brains, support and nurture our own mental health, so that we can find our professional action to take rather than always going from our personal reaction, right? Not that that personal reaction is wrong. It's probably very valid to feel hurt or, personally insulted or assaulted, right? That's all valid. But what we do in response needs to be a professional response rather than a personal reaction. All right, this is my email and my website. If you want to take a little screenshot of that or whatever and follow up with me after this, I welcome that. Here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Because we started late, we went over a little bit, and I want to free anyone who needs to be freed. But if anyone wants to stick around for questions, I'm going to stick around and we can do that. So let me unshare, stop sharing. There we are, and show. Great. Okay, so don't worry about the chat. I will take a peek just in case there's anything in there. But oh, there's such good things in here. This is so lovely. But go ahead and unmute yourself and ask any questions. And if two people, jump in at the same time, we can figure that out.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if the big reaction or the emotion that a child shows is really only for a small problem? Like they can't tell the difference between a big problem, like being angry, because they don't understand emotions. They don't understand what they're feeling. How do you help them to understand what they're feeling? They may not be feeling angry. They may be feeling frustrated, but they have a huge reaction to something that's small.
Yeah.
It's
So first thing, prevention is always easier than intervention, right? So what I would check in on or ask myself first is, what am I doing in my classroom that supports first a vocabulary of emotions, right? So do I have, and I'm not saying go spend $5,000 on one of these like emotion curriculum, right? You don't need to do that. But do I have a space in my classroom, time-wise and physically and verbally and, on the walls, where we talk about emotions, that there's more than just sad and happy, right? So that they have all these different words, and and kids really, young children really get into the like nuances of these like different emotion words, particularly if you can talk about them when they're not having those emotions, right? So that then when they are having emotions, you maybe have an emotion wall or something. Come on over and show me, where you are on the emotion wall, which of these spaces matches your face. So that's one, right?
Yeah.
Second, to start to unpack, and this is particularly helpful if you have more than one adult in the room, like what were the precursors to this thing happening, right? To you, it may seem like it was a small thing, but there may have been 5 things that happened before that, tripped this child up. And then to remember that even if there weren't 5 things in your classroom before, right now we're all walking around kind of like this, like normal life was sort of like a heavy boulder, right? Being human is hard. Being 4 is like really hard, right? They're very like dramatic. And so they're carrying around this boulder. We're all carrying around our boulder, right? And then along came like whatever, stress of some normal stress, right? Oh, my car broke down. Now you got like a second boulder on top of normal life boulders. Now you're carrying 2 boulders and you're trying to juggle them. Whoa, the car and the stress, right? And like none of you resonate with this. None of you have, phases like this in your life, right? Now along comes COVID-19, right? And here's a really heavy boulder, but you're just going to carry it for, what did they tell us in February of 2019? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Just carry the boulder for 2 weeks. And here we are, 2 years later, still carrying the boulder, right? And so now we've got our life boulder, we've got normal stress, because normal life didn't stop. It did for a little while and things felt kind of manageable, right? I never used my car. I never, had to go to work hardly for like 3 months, right? That seemed pretty manageable. But then all of a sudden, especially for teachers, preschool teachers never even got that break. They were like, oh, like in like March, April, May, you look through social media and everyone's like, yay, teachers are, my preschool teacher is my savior. Oh my God, thank God, they're the best. And then like September came along and everyone was like, you guys got to get your butts back to work. Like, this is not fun anymore. I'm beginning to think I don't even like my kid. Like, you need to take them, right? So you've got all these boulders and you're carrying them around and the COVID-19 one is on top. And guess what? Our 4-year-olds are doing the same thing, right? And they're carrying all these boulders, and then a little crack in the sidewalk, right? A little crack in the side, and you just like, you just start crying and you drop the ball and I can't take it anymore. And everyone's like, dude, there's a crack in the sidewalk. Like, what's the big deal? Just step over it. Like, I just can't. That's usually what's happening when we see a child like freak out over a small thing. Something bigger is already happening, right? Their brain is already on fire. And so a little thing feels like a threat. Like if you're driving down the road and a squirrel jumps in front of your car, you slam on the brakes, right? Next day, you're driving down the road. Now it's 20 squirrels. Oh my God, squirrels everywhere. What if 3 years later, it's just squirrels, 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 squirrels all over the place, and you're constantly slamming on the brakes and swerving and whatever. And then one day you're driving down, there's no squirrels. Are you like, whoo, thank God that's over? Or are you like, well, where's that squirrel? I know there's gonna be a squirrel. I'm ready for the squirrel, right? Some of our kids spend their days like that, ready for the squirrel, right? And you're like, here, there's no squirrels, I promise. And they're like, I don't know. There might be squirrels here. I'm not sure, right? The amazing thing though, this is why like you guys have the best job in the world, right? The amazing thing is that their brains are really plastic, right? Malleable. They change quickly. And if every day you welcome them into that classroom and you say, I promise I will keep you safe from squirrels, and you do that, they will believe it soon. Not right away, but you have to be consistent. You have to do it every day, and they will begin to trust that at least here, I can relax. I can settle in. I am safe and I am loved.
Yeah.
Right. And then I am safe. The back brain comes down. I am loved. The middle brain comes down. And then all of a sudden, bing, it lights up. And they're like, yeah, I think I do want to do that cool puzzle. But maybe not day one, right? Maybe not right away. There's a ton of work to be done there to get them to the point of safe, loved, and now I'm interested in your story. And for some of our kids, that's years of work. And it's hard to be the person who has to do that every day and see such little progress. But I swear, if you do it every day, progress will happen.
Thanks.
Hang in there. What else are people thinking about?
So in my role, I work with students who have either not been identified with behavior needs yet or have had significant behavioral needs in their regular setting, and then they come to my setting. My biggest struggle right now is we had an influx of kinders and they had no preschool. So we are oftentimes treating a lot of our kinders right now as preschoolers. And one of our biggest struggles is working with some of our students who were in the foster system during the pandemic as well. So there has been some struggles with that as well. Do you have any, what are some of your thoughts around supporting our students who have had multiple traumatic incidents over the last 2 years, not just the pandemic, but now we're coming into school for the first time and are being traumatized even more?
Yeah, so I have some answers and I have some cop-outs. How's that? Some of what I'm going to say is going to feel really unsatisfactory, but it's just the truth. I'll start with that so then I can end on a high note. Some of the stuff we're talking about is sort of normative child behavior stuff, right? It's for your general population kids. And right now our general population kids are pretty high need. So it's not like the perfect kids I'm talking about, but it is a fact that there are pockets of children who are going to need a lot more. They're going to need a lot more support. They're going to need a lot more, clinical therapeutic support. And so I don't want to whitewash that, right? I don't want to pretend that the tactics and strategies we're talking about here today, they're beneficial for all kids, but they are not enough for some kids, right? Sounds like you have a lot of those kids. That said, what all kids need and what all brains need, and in particular in this time, and in particular kids who have had such a lack of consistency, what they need is consistency, right? So the best thing we can do for them is sometimes routines, right? Consistency in caregivers, right? How do we ensure that the people they start to trust and count on are still going to be there tomorrow? How can we ensure that their day-to-day sort of stays as consistent and routine as possible, right? Even though it sometimes seems like the kids who seem like they need the most flexibility and we have to be okay with, changing the whole game plan. And we do to some extent, but those are also the kids who need to rely on knowing their schedule, knowing how things are going to happen. Whatever little bits of predictability we can give to their lives, we should. We are seeing a lot of what you're saying of these kids entering kindergarten who did not go to preschool last year, and this is new. This is also sort of not very helpful. It helps frame things, but it doesn't make us feel any better. The truth is, I think, honestly, over the next couple of years, we're going to have to start changing our expectations of what kindergarten looks like if this persists, right? We already had to. In 2018, we were already saying we need to change our expectations of what kindergartners come in being able to do and leave being able to do. That's even more now. I know as teachers, there are expectations placed upon you. There are a curriculum you're given. You need to start talking to whoever is pushing you to do that stuff and say, look, these kids are not ready for it. The best thing we can do for a child is meet them where they are. There's no rushing them, right? Learning is stair steps. If they come in on stair 1 and you're accustomed to 5-year-olds coming in at stair 4, you can't just expect them to do stair 4 work. You just have to go back to 1. But again, kids are really malleable. And so if we come down and meet and do the preschool work with them, they will eventually come up to stair 4 and 5 and 6 and keep going. So the easy answer, or the easy question to me is, what do we do? Well, we meet kids where they are, right? And we do developmentally appropriate practice for the kids we're getting. The hard part is, how do we convince the powers that be that that's okay? That's sometimes the harder work. Is that kind of getting at your question, or?
It's the crux of our program is designed for that routine and structure. But my partner districts are looking for some guidance on how to work with their kinders. But that's a really great idea of advocating to move towards what kinder should really look like and go back to what kinder looked like before 2001. So.
Yeah. The best thing that could happen out of all of this mess is not that we eventually figure out how in this mess we go back to 2019, because 2019 was frankly broken, right? I have no need to go back to 2019. What I hope is that we can go to 2022, 2023 wiser and smarter and more developmentally appropriate. That these kids push us now to like, there is no pushing them, like no faking it, no pushing them, no rushing them. If that's the case, great. And we get a little smarter about what kids really need and start like individualizing and differentiating in like superhero kinds of ways. I'd say this was all, I don't know about worth it, but but at least there might be a silver lining there, right? And I think that's true in general. Like we need to go forward to something better, not try to go back. But schools are really good at trying to go back. Schools are really good at holding on tight to what they know, right? Instead of being flexible. Other things folks are thinking about?
Neoma, are you trying to talk? Because we can't hear you, even though you're not muted, so I don't know why. And I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name right.
Oh no.
I can't hear. No, maybe I can't hear you. Can you guys hear?
No.
I wonder if it's your headset. No. Do you want to try typing it in the chat? We can't hear you. Sorry. While we're waiting for that, can someone tell me who tried to log on tonight with the Eventbrite link? Like, what was the problem? Because we're just trying to figure out so we don't have this happen next time. Like, can someone just tell me like what the difficulty was with getting in?
When
will
you
look-
logged
Sorry,
Go ahead, either one.
in. Ahead.
there was
Uh,
no link for us to go in. It just kept popping up saying link will appear soon, and it just never showed up.
And when you went into it, was that from the Eventbrite site?
Mhm,
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. All right. So we'll try to fix that for next time. Thank you. Sorry. So sorry about that. Okay. All right. I wonder if Neoma is still typing. And then one more thing I want to just plug and Peg, thank you. I always learn so much from Peg, no matter how many times I hear her speak to us. March 8th, Peg is going to be back and she's doing a presentation for us on establishing and managing routines. So that might be helpful. And then she's also going to be with us in May doing care for the caregiver. So some like self-care strategies for you all. So just wanted to plug that. We'll send that out.
Gotta come to that one.
Yes,
Okay.
that one, that's a good one. Well, they're all good, but that one.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yay!
Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, let's say there's a preschooler. They interact well with their teachers, with their peers, but at different points of the day, there's no specific point. There's kind of like an immediate like switch in behavior where they become very aggressive towards the classmates. They're actively choosing to not listen. And when you give them alternative options to being able to participate, they don't want the alternative option, but they still don't want to participate. And my question is, how can we redirect that moment where their behavior just and like I said, there's really isn't a trigger that changes the behavior. It happens at random times. It could happen during playtime. It could happen during central time. It could happen during, while we're getting ready to go to the bathroom. So what can we do to kind of redirect that in a more positive way, not necessarily getting them to participate back with the class, but in a way that benefits them?
Mhm. So even if there's any, I hear you that there doesn't seem to be a pattern. But step one is always like ask about the pattern, right? Check in on the pattern. And even if there's not a pattern of when in the routine it's happening, see if there's any pattern, right? So a different kind of pattern could be, it's when they're over socializing with kids. It's when they're under socializing. It's when they're very engaged with other kids. It's when they're very not engaged with other kids. It's when we're really involved in an activity. It's during transitions, right? It can be a lot of things, but start to look for patterns that don't have to do with like when in the day it is, but with other kinds of triggers, if you want to call them that, that can define the environment within which this might happen. Sometimes that highlights something, right? And a good way to do that is to just take notes on it. What was happening before? What were we doing? Who was he with? Maybe this is some particular kids that sort of throw him or her or whoever the child is. So that's like step one, see what happens there. Then step two is doing the co-regulating work with the child, right? I see you, I see you're frustrated. You can, if they're 4-ish, you can start to ask, certainly 5, what are you frustrated by? What do you need? Because they might have some words for it, but likely there is a need there that they don't know how to put into words. And so now we have to put on our Sherlock Holmes hat, right? And become the detective of like, what is this kid missing, right? And that doesn't mean like your classroom is missing something or you're doing something wrong in the classroom, right? There's something inside that this child is missing, right? And so do they not feel safe in that moment? Do they not feel like they have enough control over what's going on and now they need to make some control? Do they not feel like they're a part of what's happening enough? Those kinds of needs are what I'm talking about. And so start to ask those questions. If you could get some answers to that, and still you don't really see what's going on, I'd love to chat more about it. But those would be level 1 and level 2 for us, is exploring, what's going on there. And the self-regulation is part of like the mitigation, right? Of the, trying to catch it before it gets too big. Sometimes it's like, oh, like ignore him. He'll calm down, or don't give her any attention. Honestly, I think that usually backfires. They just get louder and bigger, right? So it's not that we need to go running after every, small thing in the classroom, but do acknowledge that something is happening. Even if it's in a way that's like, that you're going outside and this child has already put their coat on, right? But now, because they've got nothing else to do, they're bored, they're sort of, pulling all the other coats off the hooks, right? And you're like, dear God, why? Oh, I see that Max already has his coat on. That's great. Max, can you help so-and-so and so-and-so find their coats too? Give them something to do, keep them busy. Instead of stop pulling the coats off the hooks, right? The stop, don't kind of stuff is sort of like goes right over their head, but the give them something to do instead, that usually gets them sort of like engaged again. So try that stuff. And if I'm still not helping at all, come back and let's chat.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so I do welcome additional emails. We can even set up phone calls if anyone needs to afterwards. So do reach out to me. But in any case, I'll see you in March. Have fun. Hang in there. You are, in my opinion, doing the most important work, particularly right now, and quite possibly the hardest job we have going in our society today. So thank you for doing that. And I look forward to continuing to support you in that over the next few months.
Yeah, Peg, there were just some, I don't know if you could see the comments, but there were just a lot of thank yous and positive feedback for you. So, and Hillary, thank you for being here as a parent, because I think that's, yeah, I'm sure you
great.
definitely could get some tools from this. So, all right,
yeah,
thank you for, oh, go ahead.
Someone mentioned the circle of security stuff. That's amazing,
Yes.
amazing work.
That's, we do that. Yeah, FRC. Yep. So it all fits. Yeah, so.
Great. Have a good night,
All right,
everyone.
thank you, everyone. Thanks for being patient with us with the that's late start. Peg, thank you also. And yeah, we'll talk to everyone soon.
Night.
Bye.
Thank you.